Welcome back to the Director's Garage. I'm your host and resident idiot, Michael. And today, well, first of all, let's talk about the shirt, because everybody's asked about the shirts. This one is a vintage. You can barely make out the Who with the arrow, the old Maximum R&B album. I bought this shirt probably 100 years ago at some concert, and this is all that's left of it, but I love it because it's old and comfortable, and it's just kind of like me, old and comfortable, right?
I feel it.
Today we're going to kind of be closing a chapter on the Director's Garage so we can open another chapter. And let me explain, because there's a few things going on in my life that sort of are putting me to this point of, hey, we're going to turn a page here. The first would be that I've been doing some work with the local neighborhood council for the past 2 years. I was an elected official and kind of doing a lot of stuff around the community, and that term came to a close this week, which is, and there's a lot of like wrap-up stuff to do, and I had a major event for Juneteenth that I dealt with this weekend, and my last thing before moving on. And that's the good news is that's going to free up a lot more time to devote to doing episodes, which is something I love. We should always be doing things that we love in our lives. Don't spend time doing stuff we don't like. You know, start working that stuff out of your life and get to the stuff that you enjoy doing, because your life will be happier, right? So, not that I didn't enjoy the council. It was good work. It's just, you know, it's time to close that chapter. And that's going to kind of lead into today's episode, because today's episode is about sort of closing some chapters. I have a lot of open boxes here from the last couple of weeks. The stuff from Strauss and Wagner, and I got an iFi box and some stuff from Audio 46. All this stuff has to kind of go back, but I felt like there were some lingering things to talk about with these products. So I'm going to kind of do that today, and it's going to be a bit more of a technical episode. Don't worry, no charts or graphs, I promise. We don't do those around here, but we are going to do a little house cleaning today so I can get a number of products back on their way. We're going to first look at one impressive DAC amp, and then we're going to go in depth with an IEM from a couple of weeks ago, and that's the Kinera Norn. I had some more things I wanted to try with this. So let's first look at an amp provided by the fine folks at... In case you missed that, it's iFi. And their iDSD Diablo. We do have fun around here, you got to admit. Now this is a DAC amp that iFi places at the very top of their lineup, and it's a substantial lineup of products, and I'm really interested to know what makes the iFi iDSD Diablo their flagship portable. So let's review a couple of their products in the line. Now, first up, there's the super small, thin line iFi Hip Dac. It's designed to be an ultra portable. Now, where it's spec'd out would have been revolutionary in 2016. DSD 256, 384 PCM, and capable of delivering up to 3.2 volts at 600 ohms and 4 watts peak. That is a powerful little unit, even by today's standards, but it doesn't quite support those uber high-end files. But I would remind you, most files typically max out at 192K and DSD 64. Then there's the Black Label iDSD, which is like the micro iDSD signature, but at half the length. To me, this looks like iFi is sort of answering questions about the micro iDSD being too big. Again, we're talking DSD 256 and 192K PCM. Those are the max formats, plenty good for most listening, and this also fully supports MQA up to 192, which is the max on most streaming services. It comes with 2 digital filters and a bunch of internal filters for the different formats that it supports. It does provide a line out, so it's going to work well on your home stuff. Total harmonic distortion is listed at less than 5 thousandths of a percent. iFi is very careful about providing a clean signal, and this unit maxes out at 3.5 volts into 600 ohms. Plenty of power on board here, though it's not quite as flexible and feature-rich as the upper DAC amps in the tier. Next, we step up to the iDSD Signature, which I reviewed right here a few months back. This device offers a ton of filters and selectable settings, which I really appreciated. There are more here than even on the top of the line Diablo. For instance, you get X-Bass Boost and 3D Plus. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of spatial enhancement, but I do love me a bass boost, especially when you're listening at lower volume levels or with a headphone like, say, the KSE-1500 from Shure, which needs all of the help it can get in the bass department. Now, basically, the iDSD signature is capable of taking almost any digital signal and converting it into analog and amplifying it. Plus, there are a number of settings for the DAC, power mode, and sensitivity. Of these, only the power modes are available on the higher-end Diablo. The iDSD signature supports DSD up to 512 and 768 PCM. This is a full-featured DAC amp for around $600-ish, and it packs a punch in the amp department, 4100 milliwatts or 10 volts. It will drive most of your over-ear headphones. So now we get to this guy right here and the iFi iDSD Diablo, and what the Diablo brings is a nearly invisible noise floor combined with massive power. All the highest high-end digital formats, 768K, DSD 512, but it also adds native MQA decoding for apps like Roon and Tidal. The other DAC amps render MQA through a processor. This has a native dedicated chip that decodes MQA. More efficient. Now, I mentioned power, and here's where things really get interesting with this guy, because this thing will drive the Abyss 1266. And I'm reasonably certain that this is the only portable amp in existence that can drive that headphone. 5 watts into 32 ohms balanced. It's insane. And clean with less than 0.002% total harmonic distortion balanced. It really is the iDSD signature on steroids. Personally, I really like the iDSD Diablo. I love this thing. It's got a great finish on it. It's got a sexier feel to it. The red is just striking, and I like the controls. I think, though, that the iDSD signature is probably the sweet spot in this lineup. It offers a few additional features over the Diablo, like those sensitivity settings, and it's nearly as quiet internally. Unless you know absolutely that you need this extra power, I'm going to give the iDSD signature my recommendation. Now, I do have one other portable DAC amp in-house, and since we're talking about the differences between iFi products and price point, I thought it would be fair to do a mini shootout between the iDSD Diablo and the Chord Hugo 2. Ooh. Now, this is a unit, and it's currently for sale on the Director's Garage sale down below. $1,800. I knocked off a lot of money on this. Does have one slight nick right there. You can barely see it, but it's there. And this thing performs flawlessly. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. So what do you get when you pay 3 times the price? Well, the first thing you get is less power. Yeah. This thing trounces the Hugo 2 in the power output department. And you also get, I think that the reverb sounds on the iDSD Diablo sound bigger, maybe a little more enhanced, I would say. So, and it does present a little bit of a warmer sound, I think, than the Hugo 2. But in seriousness, there is a lot that you get with the Hugo 2 that the iFi does not give you, and I would start with detail. This thing has a ton more detail, and particularly in the bass, you get a lot more detail in the bass. The bass goes slightly deeper than the Diablo. So is the Chord worth it? For me, provided that you don't need the power of the Diablo, I say yes, it is. This, to me, is the pinnacle of portable DAC amps. Again, you're going to pay for that, though. So, but if you need to drive something significant, a major heavyweight headphone, this is the way to go. And at 1/3 the price, it really probably is the only way to go, right? Its power is its strength. The Hugo 2 feels more like a nuanced DAC with an articulate amp stage on top of it. You also get a few more spatial settings on the Hugo 2, and they're actually usable, even though I don't use them. But the DAC filters also are on here, and I don't use that either. And there is a built-in Bluetooth option. Both of these devices are worthy. And look, if price is your biggest consideration, go buy the Micro iDSD Signature and be done with it. But there is no shortchanging the power of the Diablo or the clean, detailed sound you get out of the Chord Hugo 2. But seriously, iFi's work has paid off. They deliver some unprecedented features at a very, very reasonable price. Now, next up, I want to dig a little deeper into the Kinera Norn. Now, this is an IEM provided to me by the fine folks at Audio 46, where you can buy pretty much anything, including iFi's full lineup of products, and you can get 5% off your purchase on most items at Audio 46 by using the coupon code Director's Garage, all one word, affiliate link below. Now, Audio 46 sent me the Norn and its cryptically impossible puzzle box to open. I wanted to spend some time with the Norn and give it a little more thorough assessment before sending it back, because I appreciated everything about this IEM except the upper mids, which ran a little bit harsh to me. So I wanted to see if changing amplification and sources might give this IEM a better delivery in the upper mids. Well, the short answer is yes and no. Now, the Norn features 4 balanced armatures and one 7mm dynamic driver, and I was really impressed by the bass tuning. I wouldn't call this like a bass head headphone, but it had impressive detail on the bottom end and a beautiful, wider soundstage than most IEMs, certainly in its class, without much of a sacrifice to imaging. In fact, the imaging is quite nice on the Norn, and these IEMs have really good speed. The horns are crisp, the snares are tight, piano notes have impressive detail, the mids shine with female vocals. I was checking out Diana Krall, Natalie Merchant, Carly Simon. There is a lot here to love. My only knock on this IEM is that the upper mids pushed a bit bright for my taste, and they got a little harsh on the wrong track. And in the What's in the Box episode, I'm doing first impressions. I don't get much into source swapping, right? I'm only doing a quick first take on the headphone, and I leave the rest of it for the sound check. But not every IEM I get goes on to a sound check. If it's something that really doesn't appeal to me, I'm going to do a quick investigation into it and probably move on. But I was so on the fence about the Norn. The elements are here for one fantastic IEM other than one specific frequency range. Now, I'm going to admit, I don't get into EQing here at the Director's Garage, and I have some reasons behind that, okay? First of all, when you start having to alter the source signal to get the IEM or headphone into a range that's listenable to you or you find enjoyable, you haven't found a headphone that's right for you. I would suggest try a different headphone, right? But the main thing is when you start posting an EQ setting across multiple frequencies and bring it up 3 dB here and down 2 dB there, well, the EQ itself is going to vary from device to device. An Astle & Kern SP1000 EQ is going to sound different than a FiO EQ because they have different chips, they have different software. It's going to sound different because you're altering it in a different way. Now, I just don't think I'm being fair to you viewers, potential buyers really, because you're going to be using your own specific sources. And if you're not using my EQ software, what I'm doing to the IEM is going to sound very different than what you're doing to it, even if you try to mimic my settings. So I first moved the Norn to the iDSD Diablo because it's, here, let's use it, right? And the mid issue and the upper mid issue wasn't quite as prominent for me. And the same thing when I moved it to the Canon N8 and its tube mode, that it did tame those upper mids somewhat. It still was pushing a bit bright through the upper mids, but it was certainly not as prominent, at least on some tracks. Then I went to Elton John, and on the Canon, it was bright again under the tube amp. And then I switched it over to the SP1000 and things sounded great. I'm like, what is going on? It's the same file, it's the same track. And then I went to the Diablo and I loved it. The Diablo gave it a wider soundstage, and under lower volumes, everything sounded great. But then when I pushed the volume up on the Diablo, it got a bit bright again. So then I moved over to Paul McCartney's Band on the Run, the 96K file, and it sounded phenomenal on the Canon. The Diablo, it was gorgeous. The Hugo 2, deeper, tighter bass, soundstage was just beautiful, clean, and then I pushed the volume and things got harsh. Folks, I did this swapping of sources and tracks for hours. I was just trying to establish a condition under which I could push the earphone bright or tame it, and I never hit on a tried and true combination. The closest solution was the iFi Diablo DAC amp. That was probably my preferred pairing, but not every song hit the mark. I could push the Norn into harshness with volume and the wrong track. So I know you're asking yourself, why put yourself through all of this source swapping, and why go through hours and hours of track and amp gymnastics? And the answer is because the fundamentals of this IEM are so very strong. The bass is spot on. I love the mids. I love the sparkle in the top end. But the upper mids are Jekyll and Hyde for me. They can sound absolutely great or positively unbearable. Everything else about this headphone is great. Soundstage, imaging, detail, dynamics. Yes, 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 and yes. It's so close. But in the end, they fall just a little short. And if I were looking for an IEM at the $500 price point, I'm going to save $80 and I'm going to pick up the Moondrop Blessing 2 Dusk, which sounds great on everything and every device I've ever thrown its way. Deeper bass, a touch slower, not as wide, and a little less detail, but the tuning is spot on. It never pushes bright, and it's a sensational pairing on the Diablo. The Norn, this close, man, this close. There is so much to like there. It just falls just a touch short, but it's why I wanted to really try to find a way to work with these, because those technicals are so impressive. So thank you for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into iFi's impressive iDSD Diablo and the thorough look at the Kinera Norn. Now, if you haven't subscribed, I'll ask you to do so. Your subscriptions are very important to this young channel from this old guy. It makes manufacturers take notice when we have a lot of viewers to offer to their products. Now, I did mention we're turning a page here, and next up, I'm going to do a first. I'm going to put out my first ever top 5 list. It's something a lot of folks have been asking for, and I wanted to make a list that included headphones at every price point. So that's coming up next. I have a new Audio 46 product to unbox waiting in the wings, and we are getting close to that uber shootout between the Focal Utopia, the Meze Empyrean, the Abyss Phi 1266, and the Stax 009S with its head amp Blue Hawaii Energizer. I love that thing. It's so cool. I'm looking forward to drop that one. It's probably going to be the 2000th subscriber episode. Thanks for dropping by the Director's Garage today. Give the episode a thumbs up if I mildly amused you for a bit, or a thumbs down if I annoyed the living shit out of you, and I will see you before you know it.